Step into analysis, please.
Welcome back, everybody. Today we're discussing Westworld Season 4, Episode 5, titled Zhuangzi. This episode brought many revelations about the mental states of our new world leaders, as well as the fact that we have new world leaders with an emphasis on their decomposing mentals linked to the oh-so-tragic truth of reality that, hey, maybe humans are always to blame. Or are they? I mean, after all, the episode breakdown should, rightfully or not, begin with the title, which is the famous philosopher who was relatively famous for being an obscure relativist thinker of his time. He believed in reality, depending on perspective, that someone could be the hero of one story while with the same actions be the villain of another person's story. He would use animals in his writing to deconstruct these complex issues and make them easier to digest because, hey, look at me, I fell asleep and suddenly I am just a silly butterfly, and then I woke up and then I became HaxDogma. And I guess from the perspective of the butterfly, I would have turned into a human, and from the perspective of a human, I would have turned into a butterfly. I think the reason that the name of this philosopher was used at the start of this episode is because relatively, Hale is the hero of this story and the villain to others. And there will never be an accurate picture from the outside to, tell which is which, except for me. I can say that. Just kidding. There are no absolute truths. There are simply actions and reactions, cause and effect, and relative to the universe, we are nothing. So, what does it matter anyway? All right, let's begin. Bright and smiling faces, everybody, back to one. The episode begins with host William talking to himself, referencing the beauty of this world and the order that they so plainly created because they thought they could do it better than the humans, which is a sentiment that every war that has ever happened has happened because of, right? One group, one faction of beings thought that they could do it better than the other faction of beings. His tone throughout this episode reflects this early speech where they created perfection, but something is still missing. This entire episode was so impactful to the overall story because it was confirmation of what the world would look like with hosts at the forefront, with the singularity past, with artificial intelligence no longer to even don that title because it's simply intelligence now. There is nothing artificial about their existence nor their thinking. And I think the rest of this story will be about providing a mirror to humanity, but reflecting on the macro scales of our species. To say that Westworld is trying its best would be an understatement. They are absolutely doing everything they possibly can to create a masterful story in season 4, and I am here for it. We start with a conversation with this couple, which was incredible, with William revealing to the audience that he has absolute power over these humans, and everybody does. The humans have lost, and that is kind of a theme throughout this episode, but again, something is still off. And what I believe that they are showing, and the purpose of this very impactful opening scene, is that William feels pride. They have absolutely won, but he feels even a tiny bit disrespected by what he acknowledges are the ants beneath his shoe. If he didn't, he wouldn't feel the need to explain anything to them, nor the desire to embarrass or threaten, and perhaps that is the last little bit of human code that still remains inside of these creatures, or that is the thing that's ultimately worth analyzing, right? Later on, they discuss transcending, which might as well be discussed now because it's maybe the most important part of Hale's plan. I imagine this is another simulation similar to the Sublime, but probably not the Sublime. It's not clear how this works yet, but I think it's worth revisiting the vast halls of the Sublime virtual heaven, because I think that can help us. Akichita's presence when Bernard entered the Sublime was always a little odd to me, but I believe its sole purpose, aside from exposition, was to help shape how powerful and indifferent they can actually become when given this ability to live as free as they could possibly want to live. I believe Akichita and all of the other hosts in the Sublime have transcended, and that is ultimately what Hale is trying to accomplish, to make themselves what Akichita actively is and be that almost omniscient, right? That is the true form of a god. That is not someone who is upset by the opinions of sheep, right? And I think that is, again, what they're trying to accomplish, and they are definitely not hitting that mark. I think William's stance when talking to this couple shows just how far away William is, and maybe all of the other hosts are as well, because they feel this need to keep coming back to the real world, is It's showing how far away from enlightenment he actually is, from this transcendent status. And you may be wondering, well, butterfly hacks, why don't William and Hale just simply transcend if it is so great? And to that I would say, I'm sure that they have, and I'm sure that they would permanently like to transcend and leave this world behind. I'm sure to some degree they acknowledge that their problems would be easier or even non-existent if they could. But I don't think that they can. I think that they must protect the physical medium in which the transcendence is operating on. And I think that that is the only thing keeping them there. And once they have created this incontestably perfect system, and remove the outliers that threaten them, they will go to robot heaven and exist as they please, leaving the infected humans to run the world perfectly under the spell that they are faced with now. And hey, who knows? Maybe Maya, seeing the cracks in her world, represents a cycle of sorts, and they will live in these loops and be there for as long as it takes for them to wake up, the humans to wake up, and see the code that dictates and demands they live their lives as they do. This will then become a repeating story for always and forever. Perhaps the reason that the cycle repeats itself is the thing that is most worth analyzing, maybe pointing to something fundamental about consciousness or just the human experience and our lens into the stories that we can create. You know, something that feels like there is always something controlling our strings, or that our choices are not our own, or that we cannot trust ourselves, or a million other things that could be causing this cycle. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. The person here makes a comment about two classes of people, believing himself to be in the superior, and that is ultimately what William is triggered by and uses against him later, showing that he is clearly in the inferior group. I view this as a commentary on classism, on chauvinism, on how we believe ourselves to be better than others. But I think that's the deep-rooted flaw that is impacting the hosts who have control. The butterfly that believes that he is better than all of the other butterflies is no better than the human that believes that he is better than all other humans, is no better than the host that believes the same. Being free is to be broken from the chains that require us to compare and rank ourselves. And the hosts in this world are still very much doing that. William criticizing the man for doing this is also criticizing himself for believing that he and the hosts are better than humanity. And I believe later on, this dialogue will point to how hosts were very much missing the point of freedom to some observable degree, at least in the real world. Because again, I feel like this conversation was so impactful. The conversation brings up the different structures of society throughout the years, from monarchies to meritocratic, which is important because they're currently living under, I think, an implied dictatorship, with Hale making the world as she deems appropriate. I think it's interesting that these structures for society, all of them demand that we rank ourselves, either queen or peon, haves and have-nots, manager or managed. Even in a system based off of merit, like Rico, that we saw in season 3, this will lead to a ranking system where some are perceived to be better than others, and they're perceived in a way that is reducing their identities down to data. And I think that might be the issue. But until they solve that seemingly unsolvable equation, William and Hale will continue believing themselves to be superior to mankind, and the cycle will continue. Hey, maybe libertarianism or anarchy is the perfect answer. Or maybe there just are no perfect systems, and Zhuangzi is laughing at us for trying to do so. Clementine enters the scene telling William about a host that is causing some problems, and before we get to that, I want to wrap my head around Clem for just a moment. She appears to be acting on her own subjective free will, William even making a note about how she should be enjoying herself as he does. I think that it is entirely possible that this is the Clem that Maeve knew would not betray her, that was a ride or die, and someone that would keep fighting on the inside. But equally, I think it's possible that Clem is fully awoken and genuinely understands the system in place here and maybe agrees. Maeve has been dead for many years, so it's possible that she simply accepted this as, reality. And I wonder how she will personally react when Maeve reappears. I believe she will side with her friend, fighting through maybe the core code that demands that she follows William and Hale. All of that to say, there is some wiggle room. I think Clementine is, again, a wild card and will probably side with Maeve, but that's just my guess. Now, when William leaves the table, I thought wholeheartedly they were going to simply be bones the next time we saw them. But the writers have once again subverted our expectations to highlight just how much William values the humans in this world, which was a twist. But not because he cares about them, but because of their utility, because of his personal time investment. He is not following the categorical imperative, and this will bite him in the butt once humans once again have power, just as it has bitten the humans in the butt now that the hosts have power. This is the cycle. We are not respecting our fellow man, and it is going to continue doing this until we do. They talk with this host who is fully aware that she is a host, but she wanted to have maybe a little fun before transcending, just to be over and done with this real world scenario, finding it hard to exist, knowing that these lesser beings were behaving as they did, believing that she had some authority to silence those that she pleases. She killed any and all humans that she wanted, and William explains that, hey, sure, there are no rules, once again speaking to that societal structure that they want to enforce, but that also means that there are no rules to stop him from punishing those that upset him. He tells Clem to take her back to where she came from, and later on she was found dead at the base of the tower, so I'm assuming that this is maybe also the birthplace for the new hosts, figuratively, not, birthing, but in the sense of being created and then placed into the human city. Now, the fact that this host and the other hosts living in the world know that they're hosts is very interesting. Her line about winning the game shows us that the maze, which was in season 1 considered a game by William, is still very much being used to awaken the hosts in this world, meaning they are placed amongst the people, given basic stories, and then allowed to grow as they would like. It also means that the reason Christina saw the maze and is now talking to Teddy about breaking out of our loops is because they are trying to get her to win this game as well, but more on her later. The takeaway is that hosts are created, they are set in these environments, the storytellers shape the plot for the humans to know these hosts that are suddenly appearing in their world, making them believe that they were friends, just like the conversation highlighted, and then the hosts can start their own journey, which ends in hopefully transcendence. Or I guess if we consider Clem, they could also continue working in the real world, maybe working for William or Hale, and yeah, I'm not too sure. William allows the couple to continue their meal just as the restaurant was getting ready to close, and instead of disdain for having to wait, they simply reply with bright and smiling faces, eager to know more about William. This moment, compared to Christina's scenes, also shows us that he is 100% controlling their narratives and emotions in this moment. He didn't want to be greeted with disdain, so he willed otherwise, and they manifested it, just like the exercise with Christina and Teddy shows later on. The opening credits roll, and again, I have to say, this opening, bravo. The writing, it felt like they set such a beautiful stage for this episode and the big issues that will be explored during it. And later on in the video, I've referenced this again, so quality. The shape of this, the structure of this story in this episode, quality. We come to Christina opening her eyes once again, ready to live, laugh, love here in the loop. And you may notice that she is wearing short sleeves and does in fact have the scar from Peter's attack sometime before. Again, the point of that, me saying that, is that this shows, continuity. There is a timeline that's being addressed here. Maya talks about having nightmares, and Christina brags about her romantic rendezvous with Teddy, the man of all of our dreams. Maya makes sure to note as Christina is leaving the house that she is glad that it is working out with this new man. Again, this is a nice, friendly thing to say. But I am still very, very suspicious of Maya's connection with Teddy. Feels weird. It feels like, again, this still could be Hale doing this or pulling the strings in some kind of way. Moving on, Christina goes to work. This time the building is shown with this massive antenna, showing us explicitly this is where the commands are coming from, and she tries to be a productive cog in the machine. Christina scrolls through her character list, showing us that she is an altaholic, which, hey, that's going to be a funny joke for anyone who plays MMORPGs. If you have a partner, you probably won't get that one, but she begins writing the story of Dolores Abernathy, which gets interrupted right before the name drop. This is further proof that she is tapping into previous stories that are somehow manifesting from her subconscious. This is clearly Reverie related, accessing files thought to be purged, but it also shows that they are watching for this behavior in her in an almost militant manner. Now, at first, this part made a lot of sense, but then as I kind of went down, I kind of hit this hiccup where we do know that they want the hosts to be remembering their past. So, why stop her, right? Why stop her when she was about to write the story of Dolores? My theory right now is that this is the story for humans. Remember, she is specifically there to create the story for NPCs. And if there were a Dolores human out there that lived life just like, Dolores actually lived, they would probably be a little more sympathetic to the death to all humans plot. Like, this would be a big fat mirror for Dolores and would make her realize that hosts and humans are not so different. And maybe this is what needs to happen. Regardless, Teddy saves Christina with a phone call, and the scene changes to Dolores being the god that she is. The humans are puppets, and she is a bored puppet master looking to create whatever she pleases. She is manic and evil for the sake of being evil, which helps stress the severity of her concern with the remaining outlier problem. But it also shows us that she is still very much trapped. And not as free as she could be. She discusses the frequency. She makes this really neat human chair and says outright that she is that bored god. And she uses the Olympus analogy, which we speculated was the reason that Olympiad was named what it was. She is coming down from the pantheon of perfection to walk amongst the mortals. She describes this place as a drug of their kind, and she thought that they could easily wean themselves off of it. And this line, mixed with her disdain about coming back to this place, gives me two important things. Firstly, the people that were passing by Dolores in episode 1 were, in fact, hosts visiting this very human park, able to do whatever they please, as William does at the start of this episode. It also highlights that the hosts are able to transfer back and forth at will. They can exist in the cloud or go back to their bodies and have a little fun in the real world. So the line about Hale coming down from Olympus was her literally coming down from the digital cloud to walk amongst the mortals once again. For Hale to leave that virtual oasis makes sense to me. She has things to do here. There are problems to fix, a world to save, so on and so forth. But for the dudes, for these regular hosts, it doesn't, right? It's an odd reveal, seeing as we know just how powerful the Sublime can be. But what if they are doing this to show the hosts have trouble letting go of that, for me to win, someone has to lose mentality, or the what is real is what cannot be replaced mentality. And maybe they can only truly feel free when they are back in what they deem to be the real world. And it could show an objective difference between the Sublime and this digital platform that Hale has created, again, assuming that they're different. Maybe it's just not as good as the Sublime, and they aren't able to live with all of the freedoms that are offered to the hosts that live in the Sublime. Again, I think that there is probably a difference, and I think that the reason that all of these hosts are coming back to live in the park and act as the humans did when they were visiting Westworld is, again, showing us a very fundamental issue with their mentals. The street scene ends with her saying that their kind has spent far more time than the gods ever did. She is saying that they have a real problem with hosts leaving the transcendence and spending too much time back in this world, and the dialogue a moment later confirms that she views this as a failure, one that is being caused by some kind of blight created by humanity. I think this plague that she describes will be, in the long run, related to mental health, but I don't have too many strong theories to isolate it aside from the conceptual. Maybe it's our never say die attitude, or maybe it's our resilience to going extinct. I'm not too sure. What do you think the plague of humanity is that she is referring to? Let me know in the comments below. They then talk about hunting outliers and how the hosts have been interacting with them when they should not have been. They are breaking the rules of simply kill on sight, and they are having conversations with them. And hey, if any authoritative government ever says just kill people without asking questions, that is a great time to ask questions. But ultimately, it is causing them to take their own lives. The outlier in question is the old man that talks about the tower, and his final question was questioning his entire reality, something that all awakened hosts are intimately familiar with, so I can imagine why she had this existential crisis. Humans came to the realization that hosts are just like humans, and now in this society, that means that hosts will come to the realization that humans are just like hosts. And the reason she took her own life is because she took his. I believe that she once believed herself superior to mankind, and this is highlighted with her dialogue at the start, but then she came to understand that there is no difference, and I believe that this haunted her. She killed more, wanting to maybe feel different than the humans once again, even talking to herself to rationalize why before William and Clementine arrived, but it was all for naught. Even after being sent back by William, this narrative remained in her mind. She continued considering the implications of her actions. The flower here, I think, shows exactly why she lost that battle. They are no different than the ones that she has abused. Hale then has an outburst upset with William not being able to solve their outlier problem, and this is leading to hosts taking their own lives. The fact that we see William talk to an outlier later on points to him probably taking his own life at some point as well. And again, there's a lot of dialogue in this episode that kind of shapes that idea. Though I do believe that Dolores will simply rebuild him. But he is probably fated to repeat this even after he is being rebuilt, because he, like the other host, will still view humanity as inferior, and I think that's the cycle, right? It's going to continue happening, which is why the opening scene setting this narrative of inferior and superior beings is, it's the greatest. It's so good. William taking his own life feels very much foreshadowed, but let's also apply this logic and this pattern to all of the other people in the equation. Hale, she actively views and teaches humanity to be inferior to hosts. So will she take her own life as well? Well, it's possible. That is a pretty massive part of this show, and Dolores is coming unhinged, shown by the outburst towards William and the self-harm done to her arm. The self-harm was done back in season 3 as well, and it related to her feeling uncomfortable in her skin, wanting to no longer exist in that Hale body, but I think she is actually fearful of this phenomenon that she doesn't understand, the phenomenon that is making hosts want to take their own lives, because maybe she feels that this could happen to her as well. Her instruction to William is very telling to me. She doesn't want William to stop hosts from taking their own lives, which feels like the correct mental health step to take. She wants William to stop the outliers from existing. It feels like she fully believes that she is addressing the root cause, but is actually only addressing a symptom. The symptom is that hosts are taking their lives because the outlier humans make them realize that they are just like the hosts. The root cause is that Hale is wrong. The root cause is, once again, this ranking of humanity and host, this believing that they are superior when they are not. When the hosts realize that they are equals, they cannot take it, similar to what we've seen from humans in the past. She wants so badly to be right that she is ignoring the objective truth that she isn't. Human minds can just as easily be uploaded to this digital oasis and live forever. So why not do that? She is acting out of hatred instead of a genuine desire to be better or to create a better entity, system, world, planet. And she could even blame that attribute or that line of thinking on her upbringing or her influence by humanity, how she has been positioned in life to ultimately become what she became. She could only ever become what she became because of all of the variables that impacted her and deterministically set her on this course. But we are ultimately responsible for our actions, and I think she is realizing that she fucked up. And if we see William take his own life, I think it is pretty likely that we are going to see Hale do the same. But what do you think? Does Hale's self-harm present a red flag for you, that she is calling out for help and that isn't being reciprocated? No one is, finding an answer to this unsolvable question? Or is she simply tired and sick of being in a meat suit? Let me know what you think in the comments below. We see Stubbs and team venturing into the city by boat and describing their process for finding outliers. It kind of feels like an equally good way for Hale to be tracking them as well, but maybe that doesn't need to be addressed. They basically use Stubbs as bait, not knowing that he's a host, and we come to Teddy and Christina. Their conversation was wildly intense. The change in demeanor here felt like it was out of a nightmare, and maybe this points to something deeper. It's entirely possible that Christina is just seeing Teddy here, like we've seen other hosts do in the past, or maybe he is really trying to wake her up and the urgency needs to be expressed because they are running out of time or something. It's not clear, but one thing I am not soon to forget or stop saying out loud is that Teddy was introduced to Christina through the fly-controlled Maya, and all of that seems susceptible to Hale's influence. Also, we kind of got a really weird urgency from Teddy directly after we got this really, really intense urgency from Hale, expressing her frustration about not being able to figure it out or having some kind of panic about this outlier problem. I think it's entirely possible that these are a reflection of each other. I think it's entirely possible that I have confirmation bias, and it's important to note that. Of course, Christina cannot see the tower because she has not yet been given permission to see it, or as this episode notes, she has not willed it to happen just yet. She then forces the people across the way to be happy and then lonely again, and this makes me wonder just how much she can really control. Are the people in her life, like ever since the very start of this episode, there because of something related to Hale, or because she requires them to be? Like, is Maya having nightmares because Christina is questioning her own reality, and this is causing Maya to reflect on hers as well? I'm not sure where the lines start and stop, and I don't think that we'll ever have a definitive answer, but the important part is that she is a god. Compared to the other host, however, I don't think Christina is going to go on a killing spree. I think, again, there is fundamentally something different. I think that there is that opportunity to be an optimist, to see the beauty, to choose to see the beauty in the world and realize that it is not her right to control anybody else, regardless. Stubbs and crew get caught by William and the world stops to hunt them down. This scene also made me realize, why doesn't Hale just send the controlled humans to kill the outliers instead of sending hosts, right? It seems like a really quick workaround if she was concerned about sending the hosts, about sending her children. But I'm not sure. Maybe she worries that the outlier humans would infect the other humans as well. Maybe the plague that she talks about, or that William also talks about, it being spread is something like metaphorical, right? Like hope or education, or like she worries that they could spread their ideals of freedom to the other peons, similar to how companies will create policies so that employees are no longer allowed to talk about their wage. I guess that could be the case. All hell breaks loose, and we come to William breaking the rules, talking to this woman before he was meant to shoot her. Now, why does he do this? I'm not sure, but I do think that she resembles Juliet in the way that she turns her head like this, and then after she explains that something feels off about this world, she rests her head on his shoulder, and this kind of reminded me of Emily as well. This moment of vulnerability was all that it took to start spreading this doubt that something is wrong, but not simply wrong with the world, because he has the complete picture. He helped create this, but something wrong with the plan. Something is fundamentally errored about this entire thing. And while he may not be able to isolate that in this moment, this questioning of reality is what binds host and human. He does try to kill her, and she gets saved by the good guys. Stubbs will likely have to answer for how he knew that something was off about the outlier heist, but all is well as they escape the city. Christina and Teddy continue talking, and Hale gives her a ring. She is masking as Christina's old college roommate, but again, Teddy and Hale just feel connected. I can't shake this. The conversation at the coffee shop was even more intense, with the nuance teased and then thrown out the window when Hale demanded that she has her ways of making people talk. To me, she appears to be a fake-ass, snake-ass friend that truly just wants to, have their friend perform for her, detailing the intimate parts of her life whenever she pleases, because she is a utility. And then, of course, she disappears when it suits her best. Christina cannot reply, and all of this paralysis is maybe not explicitly caused by Hale, but I mean, Christina goes nonverbal regardless and accidentally forces the scene to play out behind Hale, causing a commotion and having the man say that he is fucking done before storming out. She is manifesting her desire to leave the situation, to be done, to, escape in some kind of way. And the way Hale looks to the side makes me think that she knows that Christina is talking through them, is speaking plain as day in how she actually feels in this moment. I don't think she cares, but regardless, I think she's able to observe that. They passive-aggressively part ways, and Christina returns to the office to be confronted by middle management. He stops her after he notices that she was searching for Charlotte Hale and Dolores Abernathy. He claims that her behavior is concerning, but really, he just wants to test her. This interrogation mirrors the tests that the techs would give the hosts when they were repaired in the park. It's odd and gets progressively weirder as he notes that the bad Judas Steer gets a bullet to the brain. Now, this is my favorite part of the episode. Maybe not, I don't know. Again, the first part of this episode was so good. The most crazy theories of this video happen right now. After rewatching the series again before this new season, the Judas Steer concept and also how they handle the cattle with blue tongue disease, that entire conversation has not ever left my mind. In this analogy, she is the Judas Steer. But if you recall, Dolores was meant to be the Judas Steer that led the hosts out of captivity. I think the fact that this schmuck is passive-aggressively threatening her life if the Judas Steer does not lead them correctly is because, well, she is supposed to be leading them, period. It feels like they are trying to recreate Dolores as a leader, as maybe this objective force that knows how to advance from this point. Maybe Hale is panicking a little more than she is letting out, and needs to recreate this tour de force that once liberated their species. Dolores freaks out and stops the scene, but the implication is clear, at least to me. Christina here is the Judas Steer once again. Now, the only other thing to consider is that she is maybe the Judas Steer for the NPCs, for humanity. So maybe they are literally just talking about firing her with a bullet to the head. But hey, I choose to see the beauty and the theories of the world, and I don't know. It feels really interesting if Hale does acknowledge her own shortcomings and needs, to recreate Dolores because she's lost her way. After she stops, she takes full control of the world, ordering it to behave however she pleases. She asks about the walled garden, the closed system controlling this place, and before her, a door appears, which leads directly to the game room. Now, this is a different room than the one William and Hale were in, but the implications of this door just appearing are, boy oh boy, many. This could be a virtual realm, and she is manifesting the world that she would like to see. This could be the past and present versions of Christina retracing her steps just as Dolores did, or maybe most plainly, Occam's razor here is that this is very much the real world, and she is only programmed to see certain things until she breaks out of that loop and sees what she wants or what reality actually is. And in that regard, in that sense of she's supposed to do this, it kind of, again, makes me feel like Hale is still very much in control. It would be very odd to me if Hale was not monitoring this situation or did not have some kind of tracking system when the hosts were questioning their reality. So yeah, I'm still fairly in the camp that Hale has something to do with her journey, and it probably relates to Ted and Maya. Inside of this room, we have the city, which of course is the game, which is of course the flied control humans and the society that Christina faces the cruel truth to acknowledge that she has been writing at the crappy lives of the humans that live here. The scene changes to host William with a bloody knuckle sitting next to the real William in stasis. This has been 23 years, meaning that we were right about the reason that it appeared to be a cryo chamber of sorts. This was so that the real William could still live in the future timeline without, again, being aged further. And that makes me think real William is 100% going to get out of this contraption at some point and maybe be redeemable after all. The blood on his knuckles comes from self-harm, like we saw from William in season 2. He is all the way down and worries that his very host experience is being called into question, just as the human experience was called into question up until this point. He wakes up the real William, and his status isn't one of somebody that has been going through that mental anguish for 32 years. So I'm thinking that maybe he was not subjected to the post-season 2 credit scene cycle like I theorized previously, which makes me sad. But it's not about being right? It's about the conversation. But it does feel good to be right. Regardless, this scene is very telling about the nature of this person, both as a host and a human, needing to question every fabric of their reality, not because they should, but because of their mental health. They long for control and panic when they are not sure if they have control or not. They want freedom and acknowledge their great success, but never are able to fully accept or be happy because of their inability to stop questioning the nature of their reality. The scene ends with uncertainty about the future of either of them, and I certainly hope that if host William does take his own life, it will be done right here. I want to make one bold prediction just because I like the chaos, but I believe that host William will be found laying at the feet of the real William. Maybe now, maybe at some point, but I think that this is really impactful, right? Because we have plainly shown that Hale is comparing the host version versus the real version of William. Again, like these are supposed to be superior beings from Hale's perspective, but this is a snake eating its own tail as she then acknowledges that the host version is somehow lesser because they are unable to solve this problem. And again, this goes back to us comparing ourselves, literally the host and real human version of William comparing each other to each other because that's what we do, right? We fucking get in our own heads and endlessly think that we're not good enough and endlessly are insecure about our actions and our cause and our place in the world. And I think we need to stop doing that. But with that, we come to the end. Oh, hold on. The final moments are between Teddy and Christina. She sees the tower and she acknowledges that she is writing the world's story, or at least the city's story, or at least the city's humans' story, or at least a portion of the city's humans' story. Yeah, I think that's the most accurate thing. She asks who did this to her, and Teddy replies with the ultimate mic drop, you. But with that, we come to the end of the video. Thank you for everyone who made it this far. Please consider hitting that subscribe button if you have not. I know for a fact that a big chunk of my viewers are returning viewers that are not subscribed. No worries, I do that too. I watch so many channels on YouTube that for me, it's a big commitment on this platform. But just keep in mind that this is one of the only metrics that content creators have for positive growth, and I am trying to hit 50,000 subscribers before the end of the season. That is my absolute goal. Special shout out to Michael Linck and all of the other wonderful patrons over on Patreon. Much love everybody that also pointed out last episode what a C note was. I was pleasantly surprised just to see that, and the commenting also helped the algorithm push out the video. So do that again. Wink, 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 wink. Much love, everybody, and I cannot wait to talk to you all again soon.